Chapter 21. June 27th, 2033. Seattle, Washington, USA. 70th floor, Illini Building. Negative 61 degrees Fahrenheit. 1857 hours. He walked through the door, still on alert. Larry lowered his shotgun, using the sling to put it on his back. I slowly knelt to pick up mine, slinging it over my back as well. The soldier was slightly shorter than myself, maybe 5'8" in boots. His mask obscured his face, though I could see darker skin behind the glass. He was in full tactical armor. A name was stenciled in white against the black of the vest. It read Castillo. He was breathing heavily, obviously having been tasked with getting to us quickly.
"Who are you?"
he asked as he waved at me. "I'm Dante. You?"
"Sergeant Manny Castillo. Good to see new faces. Let's get these doors closed."
I nodded, pulling the fire door shut. Gino obviously heard the request and followed my lead. Both doors clanged shut.
"Your whole building is infested with Xenos,"
he said. What are Xenos?" I asked for clarification. My stomach sank. I already had a suspicion.
"The active threat inside the building. Have any of your people been exposed?"
"Exposed? No, I don't think so." I trailed off, remembering Gino's weird behavior. I turned to look at Larry, but he minutely shook his head while exaggeratedly shrugging. "What are you talking about anyway?"
"No time. How many people do you have?"
Castillo asked, looking at our motley crew of 7. "We have 40 people, 32 adults, 8 children, and a dog."
"Copy. Wait 1.
He grabbed a radio nestled against his shoulder. I hadn't seen it until he grabbed it.
"Ground, we have 4-0 alive. 4-1 with a dog." "Yeah, confirm. 4-1. "Copy. Oscar Mike 2 minutes. Confirm." "Copy. Out."
The staccato style of his clipped speech was difficult to follow through his heavy mask. He turned back to me.
"We leave in 2 minutes. Get your people ready."
I nodded and headed through the door to the office. The airlock greeted me as it had done for 2 weeks. I reached out, grabbing a massive handful of each sheet. Then I yanked it down, tearing some of the ceiling tile loose from above. Dust rained down and only 2 sheets were left. I yanked those down as well, revealing everybody standing still all over the office.
1 minute!
My voice rang out in the sudden silence.
"We are leaving in 1 minute! Let's go!"
All hell broke loose. People were suddenly yelling orders at each other. Clothes were gathered by the armful. Bags were readied. It seemed somewhere in the storage room we had backpacks. They were rapidly handed out and filled. The 5 camping packs were already packed and handed to the largest guys to carry. Just over a minute later, most activity had ceased. The entire group stood ready to go. I turned back to the office door. Everybody was dressed and we had limited time. I turned the door handle and stepped into the lobby again. Another explosion rocked the building. This time the lights flickered and died. I could hear squawking coming from the handset on Castillo's shoulder. He faced me even as he listened to the radio.
"Time's up! Anybody not ready is getting left behind!"
Everybody began to file into the lobby, staying close. Nervous chatter filled the room until I waved for silence. Jessie stepped up next to me. Linda stood nearby with Eddie clutched to her.
"All right, folks. This is Sergeant Castillo, and he's going to be leading us down to safety. He's told me that our building is not safe, so we have to go in single file and move fast. Listen to any soldier you come across. If they say anything to you, don't question it. Follow their order. Ready?"
A cheer rose up from the group, and I turned back to Castillo. He nodded to me and took the lead. As he reached out for the crash bar, the door thumped. A startled gasp erupted from those near us. I had my shotgun out and ready in a split second, Larry doing the same. Castillo's rifle was at the ready and pointed at the side of the door opposite the hinges. Castillo took the right side of the door where I had been when he had first arrived. Larry was still on the left. I crouched between them about 3 feet back. Castillo signaled Larry and they both threw the door open. It smashed into something with a loud metallic thump and swung shut again. The door thumped again, then a grating noise followed.
Everybody back! I bellowed. I could see the crowd shrink away. Larry and Castillo orchestrated opening the door again. This time it flew all the way open. A massive creature reared up from the stairwell. All I could see was the torso, glittering and gray. It led up to a massive chest, 2 giant arms, and a head set within a massive hood. Slitted eyes stared at me, yellow and hostile. The creature opened its unnaturally wide mouth, emitting a hiss that carried strangely in the air. I racked a shell into the chamber and raised the shotgun to my shoulder. It began to lunge as I fired. The door was closing on its hydraulic arm, which ended up saving us. The lunge was caught short as it smashed its head into the door. My shot wasn't spot on, instead hitting the creature's outstretched arm. My shotgun was loaded with buckshot. It shredded the arm, splattering scales and ichor against the walls. An inhuman sound issued from its throat. The arm withdrew even as the other hand scrabbled against the door. It grasped the metal, bending it. The hand pulled the door back, causing it to screech. I racked the slide on the shotgun, ejecting the spent shell and loading a new one. My shotgun roared as I fired into the chest of the creature. Larry and Castillo also fired into its torso. The door was ripped free from its hinges as the creature lurched back. It shook its head and started coiling for another attack. Larry and I both jacked the pump once more, sending empty shells flying. Screams were coming from behind me. Castillo's rifle continually barked, sending lead flying through the chest of the creature. Black blood covered every surface in the stairwell. Even with all that punishment, it lunged once more at me. I fired at the creature's skull as it neared the doorway, causing its head to explode. Gore splattered the railing and walls behind the creature. The body fell to the floor, twitching madly. Castillo started swearing as he brushed blood and bone off of his arm. My head was ringing from the extremely loud gunfire in the closed space. I could vaguely hear crying behind me. "What the fuck was that, Castillo?" I wasn't sure if I was shouting or not due to the newly induced tinnitus. "Other staircase! That is one big motherfucker!" Castillo was evidently shaken. I ignored his order and stepped into the stairwell. I was extremely careful not to touch anything the creature's blood was on. My flashlight reflected strangely off of the black blood. The stench of gunpowder was thick in the stairwell. Clouds of blood hung in the air. I could practically taste it in the back of my mouth. As I tried to breathe as shallowly as possible, the smell struck a memory. It smelled the same as Gino's knife when he had reappeared. Even stranger still, while the blood itself appeared black in all but the strongest light, the smell had a connotation of purple in my head. I exhaled. Then I looked down over the corpse that blocked the stairwell. This creature was truly enormous. It had to be 20 feet long from tail to head. The torso barely fit into the stairs, wedged between the railing and wall. The tail was just visible on the next set of stairs down. Scales covered the entire creature. It looked like a giant snake, like an anaconda, but with a twisted human grafted on as the head. "Holy fuck," I muttered. Larry surprised me as he put a hand on my shoulder. "How the fuck did Gino fight one of these? This thing took way too much lead. There's no way he killed it with a knife." "Not right now. Give it a minute. Let's go," he said as he nodded toward the other stairwell. I nodded, turning the idea over. Castillo was already checking the stairwell and radioing something to the teams below. He turned to the group and addressed us as a whole. "All right, folks, it's time to go. Move quickly. Help your neighbors. We need to get out of here yesterday." "Castillo, over here one moment." He looked at me. His face was hard to read through the mask. He signaled the group to stop, then walked over. "What is it? We've got to go now." "We haven't seen anything like that," I said as I waved toward the corpse in the other stairwell. "Why are they attacking now?" "Look, buddy, I don't know. That's the biggest one I've seen. But if they haven't been attacking you, maybe someone or something has been protecting you." He turned back to the crowd, addressing them as he took the lead position. "Let's move out!" There was no cheering this time. He took the lead and people mutely began to follow. I held back with Larry. I watched as everyone passed, feeding into the stairwell 2 at a time.
Gino walked by, a glazed look on his face. His shotgun was slung over his back instead of in his hands. I was worried, but we didn't have time to check him over. Larry held me back until we were the last. He waited until there was a half staircase between us and the next. A few flights passed as we walked, pausing on each floor as Castillo cleared doors. I could hear Castillo shouting as he cleared each door. Larry stayed with me. Finally, he spoke up. "Now we know what happened to Gino." "Do we, dude? Because how the fuck would he have managed to get away from one of those things? Never mind how he got covered in its own blood without dying. Did you see the fucking claws on that thing?" "Calm down. Castillo was shocked by that thing. I don't think that was a normal one." "Yeah, maybe. But still, how would he have killed or wounded one enough to get away?" He laughed. "You saw his pig sticker. That thing could gut an elephant." I nodded. I didn't feel like laughing. "So, he managed to kill one with his knife, and the blood is what made him go nuts. Think that's what Castillo meant when he asked if anybody had been exposed?" Larry nodded. "Definitely." We both fell silent. The fact that had been one of the first questions did not bode well. We continued to trudge down the stairwell. I could hear feet scraping on concrete below us and the occasional muffled sob. I kept my head on a swivel, alert to any sounds above or behind us. After 20 floors, I started hearing something else from below. After another 10 floors, I could feel a slight breeze coming up the stairwell, rustling my jacket. My eyes felt dry in the cold. At the 35th floor, we were suddenly redirected through the lobby. I paused for a moment and pointed my flashlight down the gap between staircases. A mottled black metallic object shone dully in the light 2 floors below. The concrete showed some charring. The explosion we had heard earlier in the day must have come from this thing impacting the building. It was incredible that the building was still stable. I caught up to Larry a moment later. "The elevators in the building aren't cable, are they?" "I don't think so. Why?" he responded. He hitched his bag up, recentering it. I heard medication bottles rattle. "We're moving to the other stairwell because that one is blocked by one of the ships, I think. If it crashed into the elevator shaft, then those elevators just literally became bombs." "No, I think when the building loses power, they go to the bottom of the shaft and lock in place." "I hope so." Larry said no more, and we continued the descent. It moved quicker now, and we saw signs of battle on this stairwell. Bullet impacts and claw marks engraved a history on the walls. We passed a human corpse a few floors down. He had evidently died extremely violently. I assumed it had been a he. The upper half of the body was gone, shredded by what had evidently been several grenades exploding simultaneously. Next to the human remains was one of the snake creatures. This one was much closer in size to a human, maybe 8 to 10 feet long. Only the tail remained. The door on that floor had clearly taken the impact, and the people ahead of us had thrown the door into the destroyed lobby to allow the group to continue. Scenes of battle and chaos continued. The crying was much louder now, clearly coming from more than one person. Only about half of the office had been veterans, and only about half of those had been in combat. I felt for them. It was a horrifying sight. By the time we'd fed into the security lobby on the 4th floor, I had counted 6 dead soldiers. I had seen the corpses of far more of the Xenos, as Castillo had called them. Castillo was right. The building was infested. How did we never run across these things? Larry shook his head. We walked into the security lobby and immediately noticed that there were dozens of soldiers at the ready. Castillo was on the western side talking with people. Radio chatter was constant. I found Jesse near Castillo at a respectful distance as he spoke with his team.
"Dante, I need to talk to you for a moment."
"Yeah, what's up, Jesse?"
"The bunker."
Castillo immediately turned toward us and conversation stopped. I looked at him as he walked over. "You know about the bunker?"
"Yes, as I was about to tell Dante, I have a badge that grants access. Should save you time. There's supposed to be personnel and files that are important to the project down there."
"Okay, give me the badge. We'll get your personnel out," said Castillo.
"No, I will give it to Dante. He should go with you. Take Larry too. You saw them. You can depend on them."
Wait one.
He turned and walked to an officer nearby that was constantly talking on the radio. They spoke for a moment. I leaned down to Jessie and spoke quietly.
What are you doing?
She spoke back just as quietly, never taking her eyes off of Castillo.
I'm not sure we can fully trust them. I want you two there so that nothing gets overlooked. Here.
She slipped a small blue badge over to me. I took it and concealed it in my pocket. Castillo walked back a moment later.
All right, we're getting all of you people into the trucks out in the road. I'll take you 2 men with my team. We're going to rappel down the freight shafts in the store. Building plans say that's the easiest way to get in without power. We have to rappel?
I asked. He nodded.
No stairwell. This was supposed to be an ultra-secure base. Something must have happened if they never brought your office down. So, we take everybody down below to the store. Then what? They leave and we stay behind? Above my pay grade. Alpha Squad, form up!
Castillo barked that last line. 3 other men in combat armor stepped forward, seemingly out of nowhere.
Jessie, please watch over Linda and Eddie for me.
She nodded and hurried off to find them. I had a feeling the day was far from over.